Now we know that the FBI knew it was a scam. The bulk of the information used to obtain the FISA warrant against Carter Page, the bulk of the application, the FISA application, both the original application, 3 subsequent applications, were based on information that was false. And the FBI knew it. That's what John Solomon is reporting. And with his new report out tonight, well, we're going to discover just how far and deep the protection was given to Hillary Clinton. You know, we're joined by, well, our good friend Gregg Jarrett, Fox News legal analyst, author of the book, The Russia Hoax, and also David Schoen, civil liberties attorney, criminal rights attorney. You read, between the report we broke last night, the FBI knew that the information that they were putting in the FISA application was questionable at best. They never verified, as the law requires, that protocol requires, and they never corroborated. And they did it anyway.
Right. Using
faulty information. So it seems like a conspiracy, if you're going to use that word, or in terms of the law, legal term, to defraud a FISA court and commit a fraud on a FISA judge and illegally obtain a warrant on an American citizen.
That's right.
And if I'm Carter Page today, I'm thinking I'm a very wealthy man by the time this is all said and done.
He should be, because he was victimized by people who deliberately broke the law. James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Sally Yates signed off on the FISA warrant. Rod Rosenstein, who appears to have known, or he ignored and didn't do his duty of due diligence. I spent 3 chapters in my book, The Russia Hoax, presenting the facts, the evidence, and the law of how the FBI knew that this dossier was fabricated and phony. They didn't care. They used it to launch the Trump-Russia investigation, signing papers July 31st, 2016, without credible evidence required under federal regulations. And then they took it a step further. They presented to a judge to spy on an American citizen, concealing vital evidence and deceiving the court. That is a fraud on the court. But the bigger picture is that they have committed a fraud on the American public.
How many felonies are we talking about potentially here?
Well, I've identified in my book 6 different felonies just with respect to the FISA.
And that would mean if now this email, as John reports, shows that they knew the information was false. They knew that it was questionable at best, but yet they still used it. They would have, you've identified 6 separate felonies. That would mean the people that signed it. That would be James Comey, right?
Yes.
Sally Yates is another
Andrew
one.
Andrew
McCabe.
Rod Rosenstein.
Rod Rosenstein signed the last one, which makes it especially bad.
Which is why he's been obstructing Congress's efforts to get their hands on these documents. The president needs to declassify this information, and then we'll see the evidence.
How did this email chain, we've been at this story now for almost 2 years, David Schoen, almost 2 years. How did we only now get to that point?
That's just how good they are at concealing this. And by the way, it's one more reason to read Gregg's book everyone should have. Let me say this. Besides Carter Page becoming a wealthy person, I think, honestly, that Carter Page's lawyers ought to give some thought to filing a motion to get him before the FISA court. Maybe a motion for contempt, because as of today, the FISA court rules require the modification of any application and the correction of any information that was in any application for a warrant, including information that left out the reliability of that information. I think it should be before that court, and that court should now bring sanctions. This is what the United States Supreme Court and every court down the line has written about, the danger of the ex parte practice of seeking warrants. Sometimes there are reasons for it, and it's a normal practice. But with the FISA court, the consequences are even heightened, and the secrecy is for the greatest intrusion into the lives of an American citizen. We can't have even an iota of question about whether an application has reliable information. In this case now, there's apparently strong evidence that it wasn't reliable, and they knew it wasn't reliable. I think he should be proceeding on every front. Lawsuit, there should be criminal sanctions if this is in fact true, and I think they should bring a motion before the FISA court. He has standing as an aggrieved party.
Why have we not heard from these FISA court judges? I know this is a secret court. I know... Well,
that's it. Because it's secret. John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, is actually in charge of the FISA court. He appointed all 12 members that currently sit on the court. He should issue an order directing the presiding judge of that court to hold a show cause hearing for contempt, to haul these individuals in front of the court and appoint, by the way, an outside representative and advocate, because this is a secret one-sided court, to make sure that the interests of Carter Page and others, the American public, are represented properly.
Unbelievable. All right, so now if we get other information, we knew about the exoneration. This is a lie that Comey told that I think eventually he's going to have to be held accountable for. He in two separate ways. Number one, by leaking the information as he did to that Columbia professor.
Sure.
For the purpose of getting that leaked to the New York Times and appointing a special counsel. But James Comey also lied himself by saying that he didn't write an exoneration before an investigation, before interviewing Hillary Clinton. Does that mean he gets the Flynn treatment? Does that mean he gets the Michael Cohen treatment? Does Cheryl Mills get it? Does Uma Abedin get it? Does John Brennan get it? Does James Clapper get it? Does Eric Holder get it? Does Loretta Lynch get it? Because I've got articles on every one of them having lied before Congress, and Michael Cohen lied before Congress. He had to fess up to it before a judge, and that's a crime last time I checked, right?
Yeah, I think it's an example of, and will be an example of, some of the most selective enforcement of the laws that we have ever seen, unless these people are brought to justice. The same thing's going on, by the way, when you see Manafort prosecuted. What about Podesta and Greg Craig? What's going to happen in those cases? We're going to have to wait and see. But listen, this is a whole new set of questions to ask Comey with this information coming out, and it's critically important that they be prepared when they have him in these congressional hearings to get him under oath about these things. And a question there will be, will Daniel Richmond represent him? Because Comey said he's represented still by Richmond, David Kelly, Pat Fitzgerald.
How interesting that he has the three people that would be otherwise used against him in a case like this, isn't it?
Right. And remember, Daniel Richmond has a specific conflict. He worked as a special government employee for over a year for the DOJ. His duty was to the DOJ, not to Comey. There's a real conflict there. And under the U.S. Code, Section 205, 18 U.S.C. 205, he's prohibited from appearing against the interests of any agency that he worked for in any matter he was involved in. It's going to be interesting how this plays out. He's a law professor. He certainly knows better.
Comey is one of the most prodigious liars, in my judgment, ever to hold a high government position. And, he brags about it. He's on The View, and he readily admits that he's a liar. And all you have to do is look at the presidential memos he authored and stole and then leaked. They are rife with lies to President Trump.
He says that good people can lie. I mean, I guess he wasn't talking about Michael Flynn. He wasn't talking about George Papadopoulos. Or any of the other people.
He's talking about himself and Andrew McCabe.
Yeah, here you go.
Second in command McCabe was fired for lying multiple times within the FBI. You defended his character on Twitter. That's okay. Lying is okay internally.
No, it's definitely not. In fact, the McCabe case illustrates what an organization that's committed to the truth looks like. We investigate and hold. I ordered that investigation. Mm-hmm. We investigate and hold people accountable. Good people lie. I lay out in the book, I think I'm a good person where I've lied. I still believe Andrew McCabe is a good person.
Oh, good people lie.
I've lied. I've laid it out in my book, he says. Well, I got news for him. I didn't lie in my book. I presented facts, evidence, and law. His book is one big lie. And, I mean, you would need a calculator to keep track of all of the lies and deceptions that James Comey has been peddling for the better part of 2.5 years.
Let's go to the Flynn sentencing recommendation from earlier this week. It's interesting because two antiquated laws were cited in this. One is the Logan Act. This is interesting to me. There are only two known instances, David. I've done a little research, did a little Gregg Jarrett on my my own here, in which individuals have been indicted for violating the Logan Act. The last of which was in 1853. Neither indictment resulted in a conviction. And the FARA law, which is, when you're doing businesses with foreign governments, well, in September 2016, they issued a report at the DOJ that tallied all the prosecutions under FARA since 1966. There's been 7 with, I believe, 1 conviction.
That's great work. Listen, if they're going to bring a Logan Act...
That's what you do to a 33-year veteran, 5 years of active duty combat. Right. That's how we treat him.
Right, and it's a classic situation of having the special counsel decide who is telling the truth and who isn't. He rewards those who give him what he wants, and otherwise he punishes them. But listen, if there's going to be a Logan Act prosecution ever, line up John Kerry, because John Kerry was overseas marshaling Iran against our country, undercutting the Trump administration with the Iran deal. Just recently. Line them up first if you really want to bring a Logan Act.
The truth is the Logan Act is a joke. And, in the 20th century, nobody was ever indicted or prosecuted. Why? Constitutional scholars and lawyers and judges all agree it is unconstitutional.
The Logan Act, by the way, again, twice since 18...
Right.
It was a law, by the way, it's 1799.
Right. It's dormant.
Two times, but it is prohibiting unauthorized private diplomacy with foreign nations.
Right.
And you're right, David, that John Kerry would have violated it. But wait a minute. This is an incoming national security advisor talking to a future counterpart, which seems to me to be logical.
It has no application because, first of all, Michael Flynn wasn't acting as a private citizen, but rather as a government representative of the incoming administration. And this is what all transition teams, including the last president's transition team, Barack Obama, did, engaging with foreign diplomats and foreign governments to prepare them for the incoming administration and the challenges that lay ahead. The Logan Act has no application, but they used it. Sally Yates used it as a pretext to interview and entrap Michael Flynn.
Well, now nobody talks about this little known fact.
It's in my book.
Okay. By the way, it's called The Russia Hoax. Quick break. More with David Schoen and Gregg Jarrett on the other side. All right, as we continue, Gregg Jarrett and David Schoen is with us, and we left off talking about the Logan Act and so on and so forth. Now, the thing is that nobody talks about is that we know that Lieutenant General Flynn was illegally surveilled. There was no minimization. He also was unmasked, and it was raw intelligence. So before he ever went into an interview with the FBI that the FBI didn't even think he was lying about, they had a whole transcript of an illegally taped phone call by the government. Am I wrong on that?
You're right. You're absolutely right.
So they knew what they knew what he had said, and anything that deviated from that phone call, they were going to say guilty.
And remember, they withheld the belief by the FBI that he did not lie. Listen, every fact surrounding the Flynn case, in my view, it makes it a pitiful case. This is a man who served his country with great distinction for many, many years. It's an absolute example of the Justice Department seeking injustice rather than justice, turning the screws to his family, leaving him without the resources to really defend himself in this case, and he had no choice but to do what he did.
But isn't that the case with a lot of people?
Yes.
Look, if 90% of the American people can barely survive 3 months economically if a catastrophe hits their family.
Right.
So when you have the added costs being in government, I know people now that serve in government that actually are paying to work on those jobs. That's how big a sacrifice is by the time they hire their attorneys. Every time you have to go before a congressional committee, every time you have to go before an investigator, it's over and over. So he had to sell his house.
Oh, yeah.
And they also, I would bet any amount of money I had, they threatened his kid who worked with him.
Oh, they did. I've confirmed that. And I, have presented that in columns and in the book as well. Here's what happened. Sally Yates, who was then the acting attorney general until Jeff Sessions took over, decides she's going to damage Trump. She gets a transcript, the surveillance of this conversation between Flynn and Kislyak. She says, let's use the Logan Act as a pretext. We'll go in there and interview him, even though we have the transcript, and that'll give us an excuse for interviewing him. And if he deviates one word from that transcript in his account of it based on his memory, we'll charge him with lying. Well, Peter Strzok and another agent who interviewed him came out of that and said he didn't lie, he told the truth.
By the way,
best of his recollection.
McCabe and Comey both on record think he didn't lie.
That is exactly right. So the DOJ drops it. Along comes Robert Mueller and his special counsel. They resurrect the case and prosecute Flynn for lying, even though he told the truth, to squeeze him for some information to implicate Donald Trump in so-called collusion.
Last word, David.
I think Greg just had the last word. That's really what's gone on in this case. Greg has a lot of material for the sequel, as I've said before. I'm really eager to hear what's going to come out tonight, eager to hear how you reported on your show. And it's just it's an absolute shock that the justice system has operated and been abused this way.
Is it really a shock, or have they had free reign now for decades, and that the whole thing is because Donald Trump is a disruptor?
You're right, but I hope it's still a shock to the American people that it's in such dysfunction.
Problem is the media doesn't report what we do. All right, thank you both. Great insight. Happy Hanukkah to you, by the way, David, and Merry Christmas to you, Mr. #1 bestseller.